Thank you. All right. It's late night in the heartland, everybody, and I hope you're ready for some unindoctrination, because ready or not, here it comes, wall to wall and treetop tall. Last night we talked about the Sasquatch people with Bill Lee. Tonight we're talking with John Lamb Lash, continuing the conversations that never happened. But tonight we're really going to get into some deep stuff, not like we haven't every other night. Tonight we're going to look at Sophianic witchcraft and its impact on human NLP. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be some powerful stuff. Before we jump into that real quick, I just want to give you a couple of items in the news with nanosoma. And remember, folks, the nanosoma is really literally sweeping the world, if you will, at least our world. It doesn't heal anything in and of itself, but this remarkable product, you put it in your body, and we're getting reports from across the board, from hangnails to skin cancer. It goes into your body and allows your body to optimize itself and heal everything, reset all of your cell what are they called? Cell receptors, lengthen your telomeres. It's a brilliant product. Now, Tesla, Tesla, what's his name? Elon Musk, he announced that Tesla's no longer going to accept Bitcoin for payment. Tesla will no longer accept Bitcoin for payment, which is interesting in that he just purchased, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin or something of that magnitude only a few weeks ago. And now they are no longer going to take Bitcoin as payment. Makes me wonder, my tech ace, my IT ace has shown me receipts where upwards of 71% of Bitcoin are controlled by the CCP. I'm just putting out the news, folks. You decide what you want to do with it. And, of course, the ongoing situation in Israel. Israel is massing troops along their border. They're involved in firefights with Hamas. My instincts tell me that while that's happening, look for something that they're trying to hide and sneak through. That doesn't smell right to me. That's just my instinct. That's just my impression. Yeah, there's a lot of rockets, red glare, bombs bursting in air. But look, the magician's going, look over here, look over here. You might want to look over there and just see what's actually going on. And we'll wind this little in the news with nanosoma with Biden. Joe Biden has signed an executive order about cyber security. Does that make anybody feel safer? No. Makes my pucker factor go way up, to be frank with you, because this is what I do. This is what I am. And whenever the government, we're here from the government, we're here to help. Especially if it is Biden-Harris government trying to help, I'd like to say thanks, but no thanks. So keep your eyes on that. Remember, JeffreyDaugherty.com. If for some reason you can't find me someday here, we are also on Twitch right now. Glad to see you. D-Live, back and running. Good to see you. Trovo, good to see you. Twitter, good to see you. So we're trying to expand our reach. And, of course, Monday night, we'll be going on terrestrial radio in Utah and Georgia, but we're not going to talk about that right now. What we are going to talk about is our guest, John Lamb Lash. You have been privileged to hear John and listen to John all these weeks already. And you know that he is, without a doubt, the greatest living scholar of the ancient mysteries, the ancient mystery schools. I would say our best comparative mythologist and an expert on the origins of Gnosticism and the Gnostic thought. So with that, I want to introduce to some of you and present to the rest of you a man I'm happy to call my friend, Mr. John Lamb Lash. John, are you with us?
I believe so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Well, the first thing I have to say, Jeffrey, is it's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Do you know that line from Laurel and
I do
Hardy?
know that line.
Did you know that's a Mandela effect?
I did not know that's a Mandela effect.
Right. The variant is, it's another fine mess you've gotten me into.
Oh. Well, John, I didn't do it on purpose. What did I do?
Well, you mentioned the Sasquatch. I'm thinking of seeking refuge with them from the dementia of the human species.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all are. Have you looked into the Sasquatch at all? Because as we listened to our expert last night, he's not your normal Sasquatch guy. He is in telepathic communication with the Sasquatch, and they are all about the earth. They're all about Mother Earth. They have a very deep connection. Have you heard of any connections between them and Sophia at all?
No, I haven't, but I'm aware of the more trustworthy and sane research on the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, which goes in that direction and appears to indicate a remnant of what is called an atavistic species, perhaps, a Neanderthal type. And certainly, though, they can be very unusual animals, it appears. Absolutely. Humanoid animals. But, of course, to have the connection with Sophia is not merely the sense and the intuition and the wish to be one with nature and to be in communication with the birds and the bees and the clouds and the mountains. But there is a noetic vein. That's what Gnosticism brings uniquely. The Gnostic method brings a noetic circuit. You develop a noetic circuit to communicate with the planetary entelechy or the planetary logos, which of course is another Mandela effect.
Absolutely. John, just to mention real quickly, I'm getting a lot of people saying, is John going to talk about Sophia's correction, what it is, what we can do, what's our part? So I'll just leave that out there for you. And I had I thought it was a profound thought. I think I had just woken up, which it often happens to me, or I was in the lake where I often get profound thoughts. And I just realized that you are, without a doubt, and I'm just going to say, you're the only person that really totally, completely comprehends and understands and is qualified to teach on the origins of Gnostic thought and the origins of the mystery schools as it relates to that, at least that's still alive today. And really, John, I'm probably the most qualified guy to be able to talk about the origins of what Christianity truly was and what Christianity has truly become. So I begin to think, my friend, that this is not an accident that we are speaking together about these conversations that never happened. And it very likely may well be a divine appointment. And with that, I'll turn the show over to you and what you have planned for us tonight. We are waiting with bated breath.
Well, I would add to what you just said that our meeting is certainly two men standing at a crossroad of destiny. That is the crossroad of our species. That is the crossroad of humanity itself. So you and I have the good fortune to meet at that crossroad, and we can look at the various directions in which humanity might go from here. There's never been a moment like this. There's never been anything worse than this COVID psyop. And there's never been a greater opportunity to turn things around and find a way back to what we truly are as a species. So I do enjoy these meetings, and I consider it a privilege to be able to have these discussions and to have people out there listening and responding.
Well, likewise. And John, I'm fascinated by the subject that you suggested tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
You mean regarding the figure of Jesus?
The figure of Jesus and everything that you put in that email. I am really psyched, as I always am. Let's dive into it.
All right. How about if I set us up with a little dramatization
Sounds fun.
to illustrate the basic problem of what I'm going to call the deceit of Christ.
Okay.
Okay? Or the deceit about Christ. You could read it either way. Okay? So let's say that you and I, Jeffrey, are teachers, and we're going to a teachers' conference. So we go into a big room. It's actually a classroom where they can have maybe 40 children, and there are 4 others there. So there's a team of 6 of us, 3 men, 3 women. And we've decided that in the curriculum, we're going to teach something quite special, which is not taught, but needs to be taught. It's important for the beauty to come that this needs to be taught. So we gather, the 6 of us, in the classroom. There's a big blackboard on the wall, and we're talking about children of the age of about 5. So we're almost talking about, let's say, 2nd graders, okay? And we've decided as a team running the school that in the 2nd grade, we're going to introduce to those children what it means to be human. And we're going to talk to them about humanity and the human species. So our goal, we're all united in the same goal, and that is we want to somehow find a way to speak to these young minds, young, fresh, fertile minds, to do it in the correct way, and to initiate them, in a sense, into the knowledge of belonging to the human species. Okay, that's our objective. We with me on that? You can hear me, right? No, you can't hear me. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I was muted, so I didn't do anything distracting. No, we hear you just well. You're wall to wall and treetop tall.
Okay, so one of us gets up, might be you, me, one of the others, and we say, okay, look, these are children, and they like pictures, and we know that pictures are very powerful. We have this concept in modern time of an icon. Now, in the ancient past, and through most of history, an icon was like a religious term, right? A religious icon in the Greek Orthodox Church. But we know today that an icon is a little image on your computer screen. It's very important because if you want to access an app, you have to know which icon to go to and you click it. So we want to give them an icon to click. So how are we going to do this? So one of us stands up and goes up to the blackboard and says, okay, suppose we start like this. We say, listen, children, you all know what cats are. Cats are wonderful, and we just love those cats. And have you noticed, of course you have, that there are many different kinds of cats. There are Maine Coon cats, and there are Siamese cats, and there are many, many different kinds. But did you know that all of those cats belong to a single family? And that family is called the species. And the name of the cat species is the feline species. So I stand on the board and I write the word feline, and then I say, in order for you to show the children this, that they'll remember it, I draw a little profile of a cat. Everyone recognizes a profile of a cat, right? That icon, that little design is the feline species. Okay, next.
By the way, are you an artist?
No, I wish I was. I've done some drawing in my life. I've drawn a lot of constellations mainly.
Right.
Because that's where I work. So then we say, okay, next, dogs. Oh yeah, how we all love dogs. And you know, of course, children, that there are many, many kinds of dogs. There are Chihuahuas, there are big German Shepherds, there are poodles, there are spaniels. But again, did you know that all these dogs belong to one great family? And that is called the dog species, and it's the canine family. So I write canine on the blackboard, and I draw a silhouette, little icon of a dog. Everyone recognizes it's a dog, right?
Right.
So I'll continue. Do the same thing with horses. Oh yeah, we love horses, different kinds, palominos, ponies. Well, did you know, children, that all horses belong to the great family of equines? So I write Equine, and I draw a silhouette of a horse. Now I stop, and or whoever it is who's in front of the blackboard, and looks at the other members and says, okay, now we go to the human species. How are we going to do that? And suddenly, all of us in the room were kind of stumped. I don't know exactly how we're going to do that. So let's say we explain. You see many different kinds of people. We explain to the children. Many different kinds of people. They're different colors, different races, come from different lands. They all belong to one great family. And that is called the human species. Anthropine. So write anthropine on the blackboard. And then we're all sitting there and there's a long moment of silence. Okay, what are we going to do now? And then suddenly someone jumps up. Let's say they were a Christian. I'm not pointing the finger at you, by the way, but someone jumps up.
Well, I'm not anyway, so don't worry.
Right, I know that. And they say, I've got it. And that teacher goes up to the blackboard, takes the chalk, and draws a picture in a simple line drawing of a tortured man on a cross.
Ugh.
And then he says, yay, that's it. We've got it. That's the icon of the anthropine species. What could go wrong? Right?
Right.
That's where we start. What could go wrong with having the image of a tortured man to symbolize divine love?
It's just so bizarre that we ever got to where we are.
Isn't it?
Oh, it you know, John, sane people don't think this way. Rational people don't think this way.
No, but unfortunately, as you know all too well, and far better than me, there are so many rational, intelligent people who adhere to that icon.
Yes.
So I would like in the conversation this evening to look at the representation of Jesus and Jesus / Christ, and just peel it back layer by layer and see what is really going on with that person or with that entity, to try to, once again, deprogram and unindoctrinate from whatever might be associated with it that is not healthy and not sane.
Sounds good.
Okay. So we'll do this as a Q&A because honestly, and I'm not faking it here, I'm going to ask you some questions and I really don't know the answer to these questions. First question is, and we're going to be generalizing a bit, but that can be useful if you do it well, okay? In general, would you say that Christians attach importance to the historical existence of Jesus?
In general, I think if you ask most of them, they would say yes, but as a practical matter, most Christians have very little or no understandings of the historical Jesus and very little to no motivation to have any of that on their own because it's not pushed by the clergy. In fact, it is greatly discouraged by the clergy.
Yeah, I figured it was something like that. You know, any intelligent person who has the determination could take, I would say, maybe a year and go and look at those books, and there are a number of, there's probably 3 at the top, which have seriously investigated whether or not Jesus lived as an historical person, meaning, is there any verifiable evidence? And there have been excellent books written on that, going back to the middle of the 19th century.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed.
So it's there if a self-declared Christian wants to investigate it. But I'm running on the assumption that for most Christians, it's simply an item of faith. They choose to believe that he actually lived as an historical person during the time period indicated, correct?
Correct. And it goes a step beyond that, John. Anytime that someone steps out of that faith, we believe it because it's said in the Bible, and when you actually start to look for empirical, objective evidence, that is thrown in your face as a lack of faith and an indicator that you are out of touch with Jesus.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, moving on to the next notch in this conversation. By the way, the word notch in ancient Greek is charagma. And you find it in the book of Revelation in the expression, the mark of the beast.
I remember your talk on that very well.
Right. It's actually the charagma of the beast, the notch. So we're going to proceed from one notch to another. Okay?
Okay.
Second notch is, well, given that we accept on faith that he, evidently a man, not a transsexual, really lived, to what race did he belong?
Are you asking me that as a question?
Yeah, sure. To what race did he belong?
Well, we're told that he belonged, I guess, if we go back to the classroom, the human race, we're told specifically he came from the Yehudans.
Right, that he was Hebrew,
right.
A Yehudi of
Yehudi.
the, right.
Okay.
Right. Yehudi is singular, I think, and Yehudim is plural.
Now, John, in general, for that race, do you prefer the term Yehudi or what's the term you use that starts with the XE?
Zenosh.
Zenosh. Which
no,
one?
Zenosh, Xenosh, is a term I use specifically when we're in the Gnostic framework of discussion, of discourse, okay?
Gotcha.
Well, as a matter of fact, getting back to the scene in the classroom, Yehudi is not a race. It is a breed, just as we were saying, well, there are many cats of the feline species, you know. So what is the race of the Yehudi? I bet you that you could ask 10,000, maybe 100,000 Christians that question, and they wouldn't know the answer.
I bet you're right. Probably if any of them would venture a guess, they'd probably say Semite, Semitic, something like that.
Right, but Semite, as we know, is not a racial designation, is it?
Not at all.
It's a language designation.
Absolutely.
So the Yehudi were Semite language speaking peoples in the Middle East. And the figure of Christ, if he existed historically, appeared in that breed, but the race of the Yehudim is called Armenoid.
Armenoid, okay.
Yeah, Armenoid. So what is the Armenoid race? It's a race that has been mysteriously, it has slipped out of the categories of race for some odd reason. Generally, we say, well, what are the races? You know, well, Caucasian, Negroid, and Mongoloid, meaning Asiatic, right? That's a very crude designation. But actually, there is another race. It's the Armenoid race.
Fascinating.
And they are people generally of white skin, light-colored skin, and they are actually an Asiatic race. Some people call them Asiatic Turks. And that race, which came out of what is now Turkmenistan, which is on the border of Iraq, I believe, Iran and Iraq, they came down across the plains from Turkmenistan, from the heart of Asia. They're an Asiatic race, and they populated in the Fertile Crescent and in the Middle East and around the basin of the Mediterranean. And so they produced many different breeds. Arabs belong to the Armenoid race. So Yehudi and Arabs are of the same race, but they are different breeds, okay? They are cousins.
Fascinating.
And so also the Bedouin, the dark-skinned Arabs are of this same race. So there are both light and dark-skinned people among the breeds of the Armenoid race, you see?
I do.
So this figure, let's say, just to play along with the narrative, appeared in the tribal group of the Yehudim among the Armenoid peoples of the Middle East, some of whom are black, which explains the Sephardic Yehudim. Okay, so it includes both the Sephardic and the white-skinned of that breed, right? Okay.
Wait, would you call that are you talking about, has Ashkenazi come in yet, or is that down the road?
Yeah, it comes in a little more. Ashkenazi, in my understanding, hey, I'm not infallible here, but I've taken great care to build up this picture, is a term that I would apply to a particular offshoot of the Yehudim that occurred largely through the Khazar phenomenon.
Yep.
And when they were expelled from their lands in the Middle East, they went to Khazaria, and then from there they spread into what is now Poland and Russia,
Yep.
and they interbred massively, and that produced the Ashkenazi variation.
Excellent.
Okay? So next question is, given all that, well, we could just as well be a couple of anthropologists sitting here discussing this. However, the faith of Christianity goes beyond anthropology because it says, all right, maybe he was really of that race. He had to be of some race. And maybe all that is true, but there was something very special about him because his parentage was not normal.
That's fair. I think that's a fair statement according to the Christian myth, at least.
Thank you very much. So now is the question. Well, what do you mean by not normal? Oh, well, some Christians, and here I'm going to put the question back to you. I'll put it as a question. Do some Christians believe that the birth of this figure was a supernatural event, that he was not merely the son of a mother and father?
Well, John, I think in the modern tense, and certainly 99.99999, and we could go on, percent of people not only do believe, but it is a requisite belief to have that the parentage, the birth of this figure called Jesus Christ is absolutely 100% a supernatural event.
Okay, good. I agree with you. That seems to be the case. Certainly, without doubt, Christian theology and Christian salvationist ideology rests on that premise, doesn't it?
That's probably the basic premise of the salvationist philosophy.
Okay, let's accept that premise, and let's go another couple of notches, see where it takes us. They say, okay, so that means, first of all, that the child in the manger, which, by the way, as I pointed out, is an image not inherent to Christianity. It was taken from the pagan or Canaanite religion of Tammuz, the shepherd who fell in love with the goddess Astarte or Astaroth. So that's a pagan myth, and the image of the child sleeping in the manger comes from the image of the young shepherd sleeping in the manger in the stable. So let's say, okay, so we're looking down at this child. Now, what do we see when we look at this child? What are we told to see? Well, we're told that we're not looking at an ordinary child, right? It's the Christ child. It's the Christ child. Well, hold on a second. So he is the Christ from birth, right? The Christ child. But wait a minute. Hold on a second. That's not consistent with their own narrative. Because according to the narrative of the New Testament, the various four confusing and contradictory narratives, I'm sure you would agree.
Yes.
Yeah. Sewn together by the Flavians and Josephus and all those usual suspects. Well, it says that he became the Christ, which means the anointed one. So how did he become the Christ? Well, that happened with the baptism by John the Baptist in the Jordan. So at that moment, Christian legend celebrates the descent of the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove upon this man who had then reached his 30th year. And technically speaking, that was the christening, right? Because Christ means the one who is christened. So was the babe in the manger christened? No. I don't see how that fits together. Nevertheless, Christians are taught to see a Christ child, right?
You know, John, it's fascinating because in some of the deep studies that I've done, that baptism by John, if you break it down, was most likely probably the priestly anointing of the Jesus character. So in a very real sense, and I mean, I knew you were good, but this surprises me, that you really have identified that it was at that moment, theologically, religiously, traditionally, that he did become the Christ when he received his priestly anointing. So technically, in the manger, he wasn't. So that does throw a bit of a monkey wrench into the theological works, if you will, for our Christian friends.
Doesn't it? And you know, it's not terribly complicated what we're saying either, is it?
Not at all.
So let's say that in the designation, the connotations, okay, there are connotations of this historical figure. And if you step back and look at it, I dare to say that I'm being very fair to the Christians, that I am paraphrasing what they actually do believe, you know, the great majority of them. And when you step back and you look at it, you see that there are three identities packed into that figure. Three specific identities. One is the Christ child, believed to be divinely born. The second is the anointed master. That's the incident with John, in which he becomes Christ, because Christ is not a name. Nobody in the Middle East in that time was named Christ.
Right.
You know, it's a title like prince or president. And then that's the second. And then the third identity that's packed into that is the man on the cross, the Redeemer, the one who sacrifices himself for the salvation of humanity. And those three things, if you pack them tightly together, go into that icon, and that is what people see, that is what they register in their imaginations whenever they consider the figure of Jesus Christ.
Well stated. I agree 100%.
All right, now let's look at the two second components. Let's look at the anointed master, age of 30, and the crucified Savior, age of 33. Right?
Okay.
I grew up with all this stuff, just like you did, I suppose.
That's right.
Yeah.
Back in Friendship, right?
Right, in Friendship, Maine. So, let's look at these two figures. Let's kind of balance them together. Because when you look at the anointed master, you have the figure of a teacher. You have the figure of someone who carries a message. The anointed master has a message. And then when you look at the tortured man on the cross, you see an act. It's an action. So there's a message, and then there's a deed or an action. And by the way, we would probably, to be complete, add a fourth component that is packed into this identity. And that is, of course, the resurrected Savior.
Absolutely.
So presumably 3 days after death on the cross, undergoing horrific torture, the Savior reappears as a resurrected figure. So it's actually four components. You know how powerful each of these images is.
Oh, amazingly.
Yeah. But let's just balance the anointed master, who's known for his message, against the Redeemer on the cross. Well, what is the message of the anointed master? What are the teachings of Jesus? If I knew nothing about Christianity, and a Christian came to me and said, "Oh, you're really missing something." They often say this, don't they?
They
you know,
do.
what can your life be without Jesus, right? You're really missing something. I can't believe you don't know anything about it. And I said, no, I don't. You know, you're telling me that there was this man who lived at this specific time, and he had some message for humanity, about God. It sounds like it could be important. Where do I find out about his message? First hand about his message. Well, one answer might be, you go to this book, and there's a long part called the Old Testament, and then there's this other shorter part, and in there you'll find that certain passages are written in red. And these are the recorded words of the Master. So you, who is entirely ignorant of the message of Jesus, can learn it by going and reading these words. Right? Fair enough?
That's what they would tell you.
And they quote these words all the time, right?
They do indeed.
Okay. So I'm this complete ignoramus. I don't know. I didn't even know Christianity existed until I ran into a Christian. Fortunately, she was the pastor's daughter, and she was very hot.
That
you know that story,
happens, John, and they tend to be very friendly young ladies in a lot of occasions.
This is a legend, isn't it?
But not my two daughters. They're the exceptions.
No, of course not. But we all know the story about the pastor's daughter. You know.
We do indeed.
Yeah. So anyway, I said, okay. So I sit down and I read that part of the Bible, but I only read the lines in red, because those are attributed to the Word. Someone wrote them down, some secretary, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, was around at the time, had a scroll, wrote down these words, and they've been miraculously preserved, verbatim. That's why they're in red, right?
Exactly.
And I read them. Now I'm talking honestly. This is John Lash talking. And I can't see what the message is in the first place, or if there's anything special or unusual or outstanding about it. But when I read it over the second time and the third time, I find that there are certain parts of that message of Jesus, the teachings, that do appear to be unique to that figure, right? Such as
they do appear.
They do appear. For instance, love thine enemies, be good to those who harm you and persecute you. Okay, as I said in Not in This Image, the passages that you find in the New Testament, supposedly spoken by Jesus, that can genuinely be said to stand apart as a unique aspect of the teachings of Jesus, are really bad advice. It's really bad advice.
It's horrific advice that, if followed, will guarantee the decimation of your society and yourself individually.
Yeah, and as I suggested, in Not in His Image, being as civil and polite as I could be, well, if I happen to live in a society where there were perpetrators who intended to do me harm, hurt me, cheat me, deceive me, and steal from me, they couldn't have written a better code of conduct for me than that.
It's almost as if people that wanted to do those things to us wrote that, John.
Almost as if, really. So that's where I come away, because I'm not a Christian, and I honestly, to this day, I don't know how they can embrace those so-called teachings as something that's going to guide and better their lives. How is that possible? When has it ever worked out to love your enemies? Give me one personal example where it has worked out.
Well, it works out for the one receiving the love, not for the one doing it.
Yeah, it really does.
And John, think of this, just another example. If someone asks you to carry their pack a mile, carry it for 2 miles. And that's a direct reference, as Joe Atwell so well brought out in Caesar's Messiah, that the Roman soldiers could come up to anybody because they were under Roman military rule, and they could say, here, carry my pack. It's like a 60 to 80 pound pack. And here's this guy saying, don't just carry it 1 mile, carry it 2 miles. It's nuts.
Yeah, well, there you see. It's quite a while ago that I read that book, but if I remember correctly, there you see the brilliance of those who authored that narrative.
Absolutely.
Because they authored that narrative at the time when they saw that there was a great danger of a slave revolt in the Roman Empire, because slaves were embracing this new religious ideology. And they thought, well, what are we going to do? Well, let's put these words in the mouth of the master whom these slaves adore that will disarm them and will make them inclined not to oppose us, namely us, the authorities, the Romans. And it was as simple as that. It's like controlled opposition.
John, it is, you just hit something very, very powerful. It really is a religion for slaves and a religion to make slaves.
Right. And it is, there was a man called Klassen, forget his first name. He wrote a book called The White Man's Bible. Excuse me for using the white word. And he devotes a brilliant chapter or two to deconstructing those passages and saying, hey, look, one could conclude that the figure of the Master Jesus was set up as a controlled opposition, and that the Roman writers did that intentionally. And isn't that what Atwill says?
It is, and I finally figured that out after about 22 years. But I may be slow, John, but every now and then I do come to some fairly profound realizations.
Yeah, well, the slower you go, the deeper you hole.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, that's true. So you and I as well. You know, I was in a Christocentric mindset for a long time, even though I rejected Christianity in my teens brutally, defiantly. I still adhered to this this complex icon. I saw somehow in the Christ figure some kind of image of ideal humanity or something of that sort. And then, of course, when I ran into the Steiner crowd, the anthroposophists, and I was involved with them for a long time, well, they are totally Christocentric, you see.
Right.
Steiner was brought up as a good Catholic boy, and what he basically did was he remade Christianity into what I call, alternative Christianity. There are various forms of alternative Christianity. And I was involved in that for many years. It took me a long time to break out of that. We've been in those trenches together a long time, Jeffrey.
And the legacy version of Not in His Image will reflect some of that, but the new one coming out in August will probably be pretty much cleansed of that, I would guess.
Well, yeah. The legacy, I'm completely open and transparent about mistakes I learned and how I got through them and how I cleared out that malware.
Yep.
Myself. I'm no exception. I'm not here sitting on a throne and saying, hey, all you folks, clear out your malware. I show you how I had to clear out my malware as well. And it's true that in the 15th anniversary version, I doubled down ferociously on this issue, on the question, what does the human imagination actually see when it looks at this figure of Jesus or Jesus Christ? What does it actually see? And if you see in that the ideal and mirror of your own humanity, then you're in very, very deep trouble. That's a very, very deep problem.
It is. And they go even further, John, because they tell you, they command you, really, Paul did, to have the same mind that was in Christ Jesus, to present yourself as a living sacrifice. In effect, you're dead, and you're allowing him and his Father to animate your body. It's the most bizarre thing. I just can't believe that it's been 2,000 years and it's still as strong as it is. But that's another story. We'll stay with your narrative. I apologize.
No, it's part of the story that goes very much to current events. You know, I have made the incendiary statement as a Gnostic heretic, and I know exactly what I'm saying. I know how dramatic it is and incendiary when I say that Christianity is a religion based on child sacrifice. But it gets even better, because an observation that is coming from intelligent people today goes like this. Well, if you look at the transhumanists, and you know that they are behind the COVID psyop, and that they are pushing this prick, you know, they're pushing the injection.
They are.
And you look at their whole mindset and you really analyze it, you realize, well, they're a death cult. They're currently, as I speak, in the process of committing a mass act of genocide on the world with these injections. Okay? But you could also argue that Christianity is a death cult as well. Absolutely. It has the same characteristics. That parallelism. Remember, the root of transhumanism is Melchizedek.
Absolutely. And what a profound realization that was that you brought to us a couple of weeks ago.
Right. Without father or mother, no generation. Melchizedek was a figure, but if you look at you and you look at me, we can say, wow, you have your ancestry. You have generations of ancestors behind you, your racial strain. You wouldn't be here if they hadn't been there. I wouldn't be here if Italians and Irish people didn't live for many, many generations. But when you look at Melchizedek, there's no generations. What are you looking at? You're looking at a transhumanist android replicant of the human being. That's the root of the Zadokim cult. That's the root of the Christ figure, and that's the root of the transhumanist nightmare. It's all the same.
And that's the figure that directed Paul to write 2/3 of the New Testament as well.
Yeah, and Paul says, you know, we quoted him, right?
Yeah.
That Melchizedek is the power behind Christ.
Absolutely. Think of that statement. If you're a Christian, you've never heard that. Say that again, John, if you would, please.
Paul says himself, I can never remember if it's in Romans or not. I think so.
It's in Hebrews, actually, I think.
In Hebrews, you're right. That Melchizedek is the power behind Christ. Well, what does he mean by that? Well, he means that Christ is a title meaning the anointed. And in order for someone to be anointed, there must be an anointer. And the anointer is the absolute authority. Because without an anointer, there cannot be an anointed. So what Paul says is true. It is correct, you see.
Yes.
And I think that line is lost. I never heard that line when I was in Bible school and Sunday school. That line is like one of the most powerful lines in the New Testament.
And you won't hear it.
You won't?
You won't. I never heard it preached in 25 years in Christianity. I never heard one person preach about Melchizedek.
Well, Melchizedek is a big figure in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And Melchizedek is today, to this day, recognized by the top dogs in that religion, the Talmudic rabbinical scholars, as the guardian angel of Israel, of the country.
Amazing. Amazing.
And in the, very interesting, this is a little something that comes up, and I want to really clarify it, because it's one of those things that can send people spinning off in the wrong direction. Dead Sea Scrolls have a designation for Melchizedek. They say that when the end times come and the great judgment is inflicted upon humanity by the Almighty, that Melchizedek will appear as a warrior angel, and they call that the Nasi.
Oh, yeah.
Nasi. Now, that's an Aramaic or Hebrew word. Please, I implore you, do not associate or slur that word with the N word. There is no association. It's spurious. Don't do that. Right.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
So, we're looking at the teachings of Jesus, which are so important. And I'm assuming, catch me if these assumptions are unfair to Christians, that they find somehow in these teachings, in the Beatitudes, which is again is another glorification of slavery,
Yep.
and the meek shall inherit the earth. Yeah. Oh, and the meek shall inherit the earth.
It's probably the single greatest compilation of the whole slave religion in one setting.
It is indeed. And also, I'll give you this translation. Jesus said, and the meek shall inherit the earth. And Klaus Schwab, Satan Klaus, as people call him, the head of the transhumanist Great Reset program, says, you will own nothing and you will be happy. It's the same message.
It's exactly the same message, John. How profound is that? I've probably done 10 shows trying to show how Christianity and communism are the same thing, and you just did it in one statement, and it's so succinctly and so powerfully. Thank you for that.
Yeah, not only that, but there was a very influential man. His name was Rabbi Stephen Wise, W-I-S-E. The name stolen from the name of the wisdom goddess, by the way.
Ooh.
Because her name is wisdom. She is wise, right?
Absolutely.
So Rabbi Stephen Wise was a political activist and influencer of tremendous power. He had direct access to presidents, all of the power players, and there used to be a clip, I haven't been able to find it lately, of a rally that was given at Madison Square Garden in New York. Excuse me. And it was given at a time when there was considerable resistance in the United States to the U.S. going into World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the valiant and brave advocates of not going was Lindbergh,
Absolutely.
the famous aviator, right?
Yep.
So it was a critical moment, and there was a huge rally organized at Madison Square Garden, and the main speaker was Rabbi Stephen Wise. And he said, and this is a quote, I stand before you not speaking as a member of, my group, my tribe, but I speak to you as the conscience of humanity. Can you imagine that? And that's what they think they are. They think that they are the conscience of humanity. They do. And his speech had a great influence in bringing the United States into the war. Well, Rabbi Stephen Wise has also been quoted accurately, I believe, as saying, "Some call it communism, I call it Judaism. I rest my case."
Absolutely. There's no doubt. They're the same thing. They're three expressions of the same thing: Christianity, Judaism, communism.
But the good news is that we're living in the moment like no other moment in history when all of this is coming out in the wash. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
It is. No doubt about it.
I mean, here are you and I talking about these things, both from a rather deep background of study, and not just study. We've been involved in those belief systems. We've tried them out, okay, and we came out of them, right? So
Yes,
we
sir.
have all this background, we have all this experience, trial and error, and yet what we're seeing right here in this conversation is open to plain common sense. And so there's an opportunity to look at what communism is. How many Americans, realize how close their country is to falling to communism?
It beggars description, and you can even argue that it's already underway. And the worst thing, well, it's hard to say the worst thing, but one of the insidious things about Christianity, John, is that it has people stand by and not only watch the communist takeover, but cheer it on, thinking that it's in their favor. And at the end of the day, they wind up at best slaves and mostly exterminated.
Yeah, the communists have a habit. It's very clear. You see it in all places where they have taken power, in China, in Russia, the other communist countries. They use certain people who embrace their ideology. They would be like the social justice warriors of the current scene in America. They use them to get their regime in place. And as soon as it's in place, they purge those people.
Absolutely.
And they do it by putting them up against the wall and shooting them. Right?
Absolutely.
So this is a known fact. Let's learn from history. Let's wake up to the facts of history. Let's wake up to the real and present danger of what's happening now. So where do we go from there? Let's go a little further. Let's go one more notch. And I'm going to bring up the subject of the Antichrist. Okay?
Absolutely.
And we're just at an hour now, so that will allow us in the next half hour to kind of curve around the bend and maybe even go back and revisit the Sophianic witchcraft of the Mandela effect, if you'd like to do that.
Absolutely.
So, when I started to investigate, I was very fortunate because when I was in the anthroposophical movement in LA, the first day I went to their library in their headquarters, I met this woman. She was in her early 70s. Her name was Ruth Richardson, and she became an intimate friend of mine over a number of years. And she was, to use a CIA jargon, she was my asset in the anthroposophical movement. I got right into the center of the anthroposophical movement like no one ever does, because I was never a card-carrying member. She turned over to me documents that were in the library, the Rudolf Steiner Library in LA, that were actually in a safe that only members could see.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had from her a book, which I have in my library, and it's called The Reign, R-E-I-G-N, of Antichrist. The Reign of Antichrist. And it's written by, I believe, an Irish priest. Okay? And this book, it's only about 200 pages long, but it's absolutely meticulous. And what it does, I was blown away by this book. This book is a tool of unindoctrination for me.
Excellent.
Although it was intended to be the opposite, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did this book show? Well, first of all, it shows that there are only 5 mentions of the word Antichrist in the Bible, and they're all in John 1, I think. I think 4 are in John 1, and 1 is in John 2, right?
Yes, sir, you're right.
Yeah, it's not in the Old Testament. It's only in the New Testament, and it comes through the words of, drumroll please, Saul of Tarsus. So, this book, The Reign of Antichrist, shows how everything that is today, everything that term connotes today, it's a heavily loaded term. Wouldn't you agree? One of the most heavily loaded terms in Christianity.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Well,
We're talking about the term
everything,
Antichrist still, right?
yeah,
Okay.
everything that is in that term is actually not originally in that term at all. It's developed by first, second, third, and fourth hand attributions. And he shows how this developed chronologically. So after the time of Paul and the supposed Jesus, Christian ideologues took up that clue and they discussed it and interpreted it. And then another ideologue later took up the interpretation of that former ideologue and interpreted it more. And then a third ideologue and theologian came along and took up the interpretations of the previous two. And so what you get today is a series, a chain of attributions to that word that were never present originally in the word. You see?
Absolutely.
It's an overdetermined Baroque concept. So let's go back and look at the source material. Paul mentions the word Antichrist 4 times. Well, what's he talking about? What did he mean at that moment in his context? Well, as far as I can tell, I'd like to hear your opinion on that. All he meant was that anybody who doesn't like what I'm saying about Christ, period.
Absolutely.
That's what it meant. Yeah.
Antichrist really means against Christ, and the way Paul uses it, you couldn't be any more accurate. He's talking about people that are against his message.
Yeah, against his message.
Mm-hmm.
Not even the message of Jesus, right?
Absolutely right.
Right. You know, it's like racist. The word Antichrist is like racist. You know, it's all racist is used by racists, you know, against people who are not racist, right? So, yeah. So Paul says, okay, Antichrist this, Antichrist that. So it's fair to say that in its original use in the sources, it's simply a way of saying someone who's an adversary to his message, or someone who rejects that. Well, obviously, it means a hell of a lot more than that. But how did it get to be blown up into such a boogeyman, such a monstrosity? You see?
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen? For instance, and back me up on this if I'm right. You know, I did this series of talks, 9 of them so far, on what I call Gnostic sabotage in the book of Revelation.
And I've heard all 9 of them.
Yeah. Good. Well, I had a good time doing that series. So,
and by the way, your bikini haul video was a nice change of pace. I enjoyed it.
Well, it got some wonderful responses. Mm-hmm. People responded in such a respectful way to that, and they took it just in the way that I intended it. And I was really moved by the comments in the YouTube channel for that talk about sex and the problem of sexual degeneration in our time, which is a tricky subject. Yeah. So anyway, let's go to the book of Revelation. Is it fair to say that there's an assumption in Christianity that the Antichrist is some kind of malevolent entity initially mentioned by Paul, and that it appears in the book of Revelation? Does it?
The term Antichrist?
No, the term doesn't, but does the figure. Have Christian theologians and Christians in general looked at certain figures in the book of Revelation and said, oh, that is the Antichrist, even though the word Antichrist does not appear in the book of Revelation?
They have indeed, I would say.
Yeah, well, that is complete dementia.
It is.
That is absolute and complete fantasy. You see?
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
Yeah, and this is a really big problem because it takes that meme of the Antichrist and puts it in the apocalypse scenario, and goddess knows the apocalypse scenario is already enough of a nightmare to get through without throwing in the Antichrist into the stew, you know?
Absolutely. John, one of the crazy things to me about Revelation, if you say that word, the people that understand and people that are Christians, it brings fear, it brings anxiety, it brings worry when they say Revelation. And the great irony is that the word in Greek means the unveiling.
The unveiling, right. That's right. And this is the moment of revelation, if there ever was one.
It is indeed.
You know, it's no secret that countless Christians commenting on the internet and talking on their own platforms, and non-Christians as well, are saying this is the moment. The injection is the mark of the beast. We are facing the apocalypse. And, you know, the nightmare of the apocalypse, which was born out of the psychotic, paranoid hallucinations of a monk,
yes,
has registered itself in human imagination at a profound level. And now it's got to come out. It's like a toxin that's got to come out of the system.
It absolutely is exactly like that.
Yeah, we need some nanosoma to restore ourselves to sanity, right?
We do, indeed.
So, where's all this going? Coming around the bend in the home stretch here. Well, let me ask you, if you don't mind, you must have had during your long experiment and experience in Christianity, you must have also had a certain notion of the Antichrist as a powerful supernatural or satanic agent. Is that so?
That is so. In fact, I actually was guilty of writing a book back in the day, although it sold really well. It falsely identified someone as the Antichrist. So I'm sure it doesn't surprise you, John. I think you mentioned that JD stands for juvenile delinquent, and I've always been rather delinquent. And if I don't do anything halfway, I go all in. And I wrote a book about the Antichrist, identifying someone as them, and it wasn't right. So yeah, I fell in. Well,
join the crowd. Good many people have done that, tried to do that, warn about it, and it's in a way, it's inevitable that would happen when you understand how the human imagination works. You see?
Yep.
Today we call it a meme. Okay? That's a meme that was planted in the imagination of our species. And as Christianity went out to the various races, there is one species, there are many races.
Yep.
As it went out, that meme spread like a virus into their minds. And it's something that's got to come out. It's got to come out because it's a toxic meme. And so, of course, people wanted to identify. There are many cases of trying to identify who is the Antichrist in different periods of history.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think we're doing pretty well. Just had a big drink of water.
It sounded like you needed it. I often thought of when we were later in my years in Christianity, when, how at a birthday party you'll do the, pin the tail on the donkey. I often thought of pin the tail on the Antichrist because, anybody that it becomes a world figure invariably is going to be labeled the Antichrist by many people.
Well, let's take one last shot at that. let's try again, respectfully, to represent accurately what many Christians today believe when they look at world events and they see the Antichrist in some figure, like what? I don't know, Klaus Schwab, whoever, I don't know, Elon Musk, you know.
Obama has been a popular one, even Trump.
Even Trump, right. What are they doing? Where is that taking them? To me, it's as if they're like thrashing around, trying to identify the root of this evil that is now in our faces. Remember that Gnostic saying from one of the Nag Hammadi texts: who does not know the root of evil is no stranger to it. Right?
Right.
So the challenge, the Gnostic challenge, is to see the actual root of evil in the world today. But that challenge and the Gnostic message contains an answer to that. But unfortunately, I would say that many Christians suffer confusion and cognitive dissonance because they are trying to see the root of evil. They give it the name of the Antichrist, but they don't get to the truth.
You know why it is, John? I learned this today in my sauna, that one of the big problems is it doesn't matter how many clues you see if you don't know what the crime is.
I was going to quote my line. Now you're quoting my line. I love that line. I used it in the Mandela Effect talks. All the clues in the world don't count if you don't know what crime has been committed. That
Absolutely.
is the problem. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. We are living in a time when the transhumanist movement, the transhumanist cabal, which is financial, pharmaceutical, military, media-driven, massive cabal, is perpetrating a crime against humanity. You know, this crime is not over. It's a crime that's being committed. It's as if you one day were upstairs in your bedroom and you looked out at your neighbor's house and you knew they were gone for the weekend. You saw someone pulled up a van and they broke in the back door and they're chucking all the stuff in the neighbor's house into the van. You're witnessing a crime in progress. You're not witnessing a crime. You're not on the crime scene and the crime's over. This is the crime scene. We're on the crime scene right now. And the good news is that the crime is in progress and it can be stopped while it's in progress. But that takes responsibility, insight, sobriety, and it's going to require some of those good people who attach themselves to being Christians to just drop the baggage, because that baggage will not help them overcome this evil that we're facing.
And why, if you're it's hard enough to overcome evil, but it makes it impossible if you're carrying unnecessary baggage.
I think so. I do, yeah. It's like going into battle with suitcases and baggage.
And no one would do it, but yet here we are doing it.
That's right. And that's what indoctrination is, isn't it? And that's the result of indoctrination.
Indeed.
So, you want to talk a little about Sophianic witchcraft?
I would love to talk about Sophianic witchcraft.
Well, I'll start out in this way.
Can I ask you one question, John, before that? Well, let me just, to me, there's magic and there's witchcraft. And I was at a time foolishly initiated into a ceremonial, magical mystery school, I guess you would be. So I'm not speaking out of school. Magic is where you use somebody else's sigils, somebody else's incantations, somebody else's spells, the names and powers of other people to direct intention and make things happen, and many times without concern to the intention or will of other people. Whereas witchcraft is the use of your own intention, your own will, in unison with, in accordance with the laws of nature, only to do benevolent manifestations of your own will.
That's an interesting distinction. You know, there's a formula of witchcraft. I don't know how ancient it is. I don't think it's that old. I've tried to trace it back. It probably came into definition during the period of the revival of Wicca and witchcraft, or nature magic, in England, not so long ago, in the last century. But it's called the Wiccan Rede.
Yes.
R-E-D-E, meaning the creed.
Right.
And it says, "Do what thou wilt, and it harm none."
Right.
Okay? And it harm none. Well, of course, as you probably know, the first four words, "do what thou wilt," are notoriously associated with Aleister Crowley. Right. And that goes into this whole spiral of this delusional system of Crowley magic and all that kind of stuff. But no, it's "do what thou wilt, and it harm none." That's the foundation of Wicca magic in its positive and benevolent sense, and you state that very well. Well, I never make excuses for myself, but I have to say that I do use both words, magic and witchcraft, and I know that they are corrupted terms and they're easily mistaken, but I use them because I like them, and I have, if people have the patience to listen to me, then I can make clear exactly what I mean by those terms.
Absolutely.
And why I use them. So you see the word witch. I like the word witch because it goes back to very ancient roots, and it goes back to the same Indo-European root, which is W-I-T or W-I-D. So there are many words that have the same root, and that root means wisdom.
Yep.
And wisdom is the name of the mother goddess, the earth goddess. She is wisdom. That's her name. So you have wizard, witch, wit. Wit is a form of wisdom. It's the comedic form of wisdom. And so I attach myself to that meaning, and I try to keep what I say about it, on a clear track. Now, magic is another matter. This is how I define magic. In two ways. First of all, the founders of what later came to be known as the Gnostic schools of the mysteries were of the Magian order. Mm-hmm. They were the Magi. So they are the Magi that you find mentioned in the narrative of the Christ child, Supposedly the three Magi came to visit the Christ child. Well, right. That word Magi is, again, not unique to Christianity. It is taken, stolen, and used for the purposes of the biblical narrative. But the Magians were the root order of the Gnostics. So again, wow. It's a root. It's the root of the word magnitude, magnificent, magnify. So what is magic? It's magnification. That's what it is. So everyone knows that they have their own will and their own intention. And they use their intention to live in life. They use their intention to make a meal, to take a journey, to create something, to write a book. Now, when you can use your intention and magnify your intention, you're performing magic.
Absolutely.
And so, how do you magnify your intention? Well, this is where the Gnostic intel gets very precise. I've been teaching since 2008, which is what I call planetary tantra. And I defined it originally as interactive magic with Gaia. So I defined it. So
I love
there is
it.
Gaia. Yeah, it's lovely. There is Gaia. There is the Mother Earth. She's a living animal, a planetary animal, more like an amoeba than than a goat or a giraffe, an amoebic-like animal. And she is the great power and the great power source of our lives. So when you practice magic to magnify your own intention, you combine your intention with her intention. That's what causes the magnification. You can't magnify it on your own. I think that that's a false premise of many systems of magic. They claim that by doing rituals, repeating certain phrases, lighting candles, drawing sigils or whatever, that those actions alone magnify your intention. I don't subscribe to that principle at all. To me, the magnification of human intention comes in one way only. It's through the coupling of your intention with her intention. Through the coupling of your mind with her mind. That's the magnification. That's the magic.
Very powerful, John. Very powerful. And I would agree that, and if you can successfully couple your intention with hers, then you're going to have some very powerful magic, aren't you?
Well, there's a number of people around the world today, I can't say how many, who have chosen to experiment, because this is experimental. Nothing like this has ever been, no system of magic like this has ever exactly been proposed before, you see. A form of Gaian magic based on the Gnostic teachings. And it works, and there's a lot of proof that it works in the lives of many people. But to finally make my point really clear, I always emphasize that there is a specific technical term for this kind of magic. And it's called autogenics. Autogenics, okay? Most people have never heard the word autogenics, but it is the name given to a certain genre by the man who invented it, who was a German, who lived in the 20s and the 30s. And this German physiologist and psychologist and doctor devised this system of practice, which he called autogenics, and which is called today biofeedback. Right. Have you ever been hooked up to a biofeedback machine?
I have.
Right. So you know how it works, right?
I do.
You sit there and you get readings on a panel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Readings usually of your blood pressure, your respiration, your temperature, maybe your basal metabolic rate, all these readings of your physiological functions. And if you are, for example, someone who has high blood pressure, you see the reading right there on the panel, on the console. And then by certain acts of concentration and auto-suggestion, you can actually lower your blood pressure to what is the healthy level, right?
Right.
That's biofeedback. Right. So planetary tantra is simply the method of entering into biofeedback with the living planet, with the Earth Mother. And so you are in an autogenic circuit. That's what it is. It's an autogenic circuit. And you send to her and receive from her. And there are specific tools and techniques for doing this and for testing whether it's correct or not, and for verifying it with other people who do the same thing. So I originally said interactive magic with Gaia. What I say today is autogenics with the living presence of the earth. That's what I teach. That's what planetary tantra is. That is the living gnosis today. That is what gnosis looks like today in practice.
So it sounds like I need to dive very quickly and very deeply into nemata.org, where I'm now a member.
Sure, but there's a page on Nemata, there's a visitors page, which you don't have to be a member to access, and there's also the Planetary Tantra page, which is Course 16. And I said from the beginning in 2008, when I started to pull this all together, that Planetary Tantra would always be free. So no one has to be a member or to donate to the school in order to get all the benefit of what I'm talking about now. It's entirely free on Nemata. And then there are the other courses which are available to members only. I want to make that really clear.
Powerful, John. And that's a great service to humanity, no doubt about it.
That's a lot of fun, too. It's a tremendous adventure. The experiences that people have, I call it experimental mysticism. Ooh. That they have, yeah. It's just some of the things that happen are just totally supernatural, and yet they're not woo-woo, make-believe, new age fantasy. They're grounded. This is a grounded practice. You have to be grounded to have this autogenic circuit with the earth. It's something very precise. It's not make-believe and pretending. And one of the skills that you learn in this practice is to discern between what is make-believe and what is provable.
Ooh, boy, now that is a skill that is sorely needed in this world today.
Isn't it? Isn't it? Especially in so-called spiritual matters.
Oh, my. I mean, there's more, I'll just say there's more bullshit in this spiritual genre than probably any other genre.
Indeed. I don't even use the word spiritual anymore. I've discarded it as useless.
It is useless. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
So let's conclude on this point. We're at an hour and a half. Maybe we can talk more if you want, or you can have call-ins. But let me just, if I may, conclude with this point.
Okay.
I conducted an experiment openly. I do everything openly and transparently. Okay? I conducted an experiment between February and October in 2017, which I call Mandela Effect Decoded. Right? It consisted of about 70 talks. That's probably almost 100 hours, and 200 or 220 pages of illustrations and text to back it all up. I considered, like I've said in our other talk, something like 85 specific instances of the Mandela Effect, and I decoded them, and I knitted them together into messages to show that there was a message coming through this bizarre anomaly of memory. Okay? And what I proved in the Mandela Effect was that she, the Earth Mother, the intelligence of the planet, has actually hacked into our world at the most superficial and banal level, and is actually signaling us there. And when you learn to recognize how her mind works and how she communicates, then you can signal back and you can develop this autogenic circuit of feedback, and that is the supreme connection to the spiritual or the supernatural, in my opinion.
I agree with that profoundly, and I've stated the same thing in different words, and it really is so profound. And once it actually starts happening to you or for you or with you, it seems to me, John, it only takes one time for it to quote unquote work, and then you're really motivated, you're really hooked, so to speak, in a good way, and it absolutely changes your life in the most profound ways possible.
Well, in Planetary Tantra, we have many terms of endearment for the Earth Mother, the Wisdom Goddess. It's just like if you have a dog. How many names do you have for your dog? Yep. People may have 5, 6 names for their dogs, or for your wife, not to compare animals and people, but how many Sweetums, Snooky, Cookie, whatever. How many names of endearment? It's natural. There are many names of endearment for her, and one of them is Vajravilasi, which means flirtatious lightning.
Oh, I
She
love that.
comes to you into your NLP circuits like flirtatious lightning. That is a fact.
So well put. So well put. I also like, I can't remember how you pronounce it, but the one that basically means audacious.
Prunikos.
Prunikos. That's right.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Love it. You want to take a couple calls, John?
Sure, why not?
Ladies and gentlemen, a rare opportunity. It's 913-279-0831. 913-279-0831. If you can be polite, if you can be interesting, get on the horn right now. Call, and you'll be live with John Lamb Lash as soon as you pick up the phone. So call in, don't waste time, and like Fish would say, have a tank and don't suck. Again, it's 913-279-0831, and it's also scrolling along the bottom of the screen. So we are ready. John, I appreciate you so much being here and doing this. And while we're waiting for the calls to queue up, could you just go ahead and share where people can get information about your work?
Well, yes. Just go to nemeta.org, NEMETA.org. And that is, you could say, my online school. So on that school, you can study 16 different courses if you want to. And it's quite a wide assortment, quite a banquet of things to study and learn. But not just intellectually. These are things that you bring into your life. You bring into the theater of life, and you practice these things in life, even though you may go to the internet school to find them. I always emphasize that they are not in the virtual. They are for living in real life reality. And the second direction I would give, and I would advise to everyone, concerns the story of our Divine Mother. Okay? I often say that it's normal and natural to human beings that when you love someone, a wife or a friend, a husband, you come to know their life story as well as you know your own. And the events and incidents and trials and triumphs in the life of that person are as important to you as your own life story. That's love. It's the same thing with the Earth Mother, the Divine Mother, the planet. If you want to love her, then learn her story. And you can learn that story by going to Sophianic Myth, SOPHIANIC MYTH, Sophianicmyth.org. And there you'll see a beautiful 4-minute video introducing her story. And if you enter email address and username, you will receive every 4 or 5 days one of the episodes of her story, to a total of 9 episodes. And that way you learn the story of that which is the source of your life. This divine presence that is here in front of you now, it's not in some other world. It's not intangible. It's material. It's sensorial, right in front of you. That's the difference in the recognition of Sophia. She is here in nature. She is not somewhere beyond the natural world. So learn her story. And also I'm happy to say that due to a student of Planetary Tantra in Australia, we can now offer audio readings of those narratives, of those 9 episodes, so you can listen to them as well. And they will be available free on Nemeta.
Excellent. It's late night in the Heartland. You're live with Jeffrey Daugherty and John Lamb Lash.
Awesome. Awesome show, gentlemen. I really do appreciate all the work that you put into bringing a great presentation to everyone. My question for John is regarding the eradication of the Yehudans. Are you open to the idea of final solutions, or is that something that will be handled by Gaia?
No, it will be.
Question, John. At the beginning.
Yeah, great start. Take it from the top, my friend, as I try to do. Great question. It is incorporated in her correction, but at the same time, her correction cannot be achieved without a measure of human participation. So lately, I've been balancing together two memes or two themes, correction and resolution. So resolution is that part of correction that humans have to achieve on their own terms. It's our part that we give to it. She cannot fulfill her correction entirely on her own. So, what about this idea of elimination or extermination? Well, the way I see it is that historical record clearly shows that there has been a reaction to that particular group over history that has repeated itself over and over again. You know, it reminds me of the joke, gee, I was thrown out of 200 bars in Tampa, Florida. What's wrong with those people in those bars, right?
Exactly.
It sort of reminds me of that, right? This is a very great problem, historically speaking, and it is now at its final stage. It is now at its final stage, but what can bring it about, and how is it going to come about? I would say that it's coming about from different directions. The resolution is forming in the conscience of people around the world to face this particular specific source of evil and deceit. And what the opportunity of today is going to bring about that resolution, because it's one thing to say, oh, there's a group of people over there, and maybe it would be a good idea to exterminate them. But it's another thing to realize that you are the people who are targeted for extermination.
Mm.
And once that realization starts to filter through this vaccination program, through the adverse effects of these vaccines, once the big picture starts to come into view, and people realize in all races, in all countries, hey, we're the ones who are targeted for extermination, then the tide will change. Then the ground will be established for handling that very, very, very great problem.
Wow, very well stated, John. I appreciate that. It's Late Night in the Heartland. You're live with Jeffrey Daugherty and John Lash.
John and Jeff, this is John in Tulsa. I just wanted to call in because I'm really enjoying the show and hearing what John and you had to say. I have always been very close to nature and to animals, especially. I'm the kind of guy that will just, if I see a turtle in the middle of the road, I'll pull a car over and move him where you don't get run over. I do that all the time. And I feel this connection with the creatures and the animal and the creation. And it's just something spiritual with me. I mean, I can't explain it, but it's just there. And I think that's where it's at. It's really, and I see the Dalai Lama and some of those people that they believe that they'll move earthworms and things to keep from killing them, you know. And I can tell you one experience I had that was very traumatic and spiritual. A possum got hung up in my garage door when it went up and got the cord, the wire on that thing, and cut him in half, and he was dragging himself off. And I was so traumatized by it. I had to take a hammer and hit him in the head, and it was the hardest thing I ever did, but I just had to put him out of the misery. And, you know, I just couldn't see this thing crawling off into the woods and cut in half and just suffering like that, dying. So I don't know what you think about all that, but that's just where I'm at.
Thank you, John. Appreciate
Thank you very much. It's extremely relevant what you say. There is a huge component in the Gnostic practice today about human empathy for animals. You may know, if you've heard me speak before, that I talk about us as animals. I say human animal. I don't say human being. To me, animal is not an insult, Oh, they were acting like animals. That concept has to be corrected. We are an animal species among other many millions of animal species. And respect and affection for those other animal species is a part of why we're here. And there is, I can't go into it now because it would be quite an elaboration, but I've brought forward in the 15th anniversary edition of the book, I brought forward strongly what the Gnostic message is about our connection to animals and how it is essential to our humanity. I explained that in a way, you could say that you can measure your sense of humanity against the empathy you have for other non-human animals. And you cannot hold your sense of humanity apart from that. You see? This is a really big piece of the Gnostic message today, and I'm very glad that you brought it up. It's important.
Very, very, very profound. John, I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. It's been another great night, and let's take this one last call, and we'll let you get back to what you've got on your agenda. It's Late Night in the Heartland. You're live with John Lamb Lash.
Hey, greetings, and Oline. Jeffrey Daugherty. It's my pleasure to be on the show here with you guys tonight. I wanted to ask John, he probably saw my video, I'm pretty sure he did, and I like to think that that's a good example of interactive magic, and I just wanted to get his opinion on that. And we've been also talking a lot about crypto lately, and just wanted to know if he had any thoughts on that lately.
Thank you. Oh, I did. Yeah, thank you. I do indeed have some thoughts on crypto. So let me tell you quite quickly a strange little story. Maybe it's not so strange. It gets back to that saying that Jeff mentioned, all the clues in the world don't count unless you know what crime has been committed, right?
Absolutely.
So recently I had occasion to go back and revisit the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, because I did this series of talks ending with the identification of the Whore of Babylon. That was quite a thrill in that one. And I think I'm good. Yeah, I think I'm going to add one more just as a summary. But as I explained in those talks, I looked closely at the Greek original, the Koine, of one of the most quoted passages in Revelation, which is, and no one shall be allowed to buy or sell lest they have the mark of the beast. Okay? Charagma, the mark of the beast. Now, it not only means a notch, which could be like the notch in an arrow. Consider an arrow and how an arrow is constructed. It has an arrowhead, a shaft, and then it has the part that has the notch. And the notch goes in the string. So if charagma means notch, and you put it in that analogy, it has something to do with aiming or intention, or aiming at the right target, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Charagma can also mean bullseye. It can mean the center of the target that you're aiming at. So I looked at the terms that are used in Greek, which are translated buy and sell. And they don't look that way to me. That does not look correct. For instance, the word for buy is actually of the verb form of agora. And the agora is the marketplace, the commons where people gather. So agora, the verb agora, really means to gather. Okay? And then I looked at the word for sell, which I can't quite remember what that is now, and I looked at the root of it and went back, and I said, well, you could just as well translate it as trade. So how about this? None shall be allowed to gather and trade unless they share the aim of the beast. That's how I would translate it. And of course, the beast is Sophia herself, the planetary animal mother.
Yep.
So it's an interesting coincidence, getting back to the gentleman who brings up crypto, that I began to really give my close attention to crypto exactly at the time that I was putting out in public this translation of this verse. And I thought, that kind of refers to crypto. Because you see, as long as you're in the fiat currency system, which is run by you know who,
Right.
and which is a mass planetary financial scam of racketeering and fraud and deceit, then you're in the system of buy and sell, and they run the system. But if you go to crypto, you're in a system of gather and trade, and they don't run that system. The only people that run that system are the people that use it, you see? So it occurred to me oddly that you could say, in a way you could say that verse refers to the option which is presented by crypto today, and there are problems with crypto, and I have questions about it, but the option to get out of the buy and sell Rothschild financial mafia system and manage our own economy. And if there's anyone who wants to manage our own economy, it's the Mother Goddess. That's why we're here. We're here to manage nature, to manage social relations without interference of a righteous third party.
I love it. And by the way, John, that word was paleo, which means to exchange or barter.
Yes, that's right. Paleo, exactly. So crypto is quite a phenomenon of our time, and it's something definitely worth learning about. And I'm just at the beginning of learning about it myself right now.
And John, I would appreciate it if you learn anything profound, shoot me an email. I'm in the same position that you are on that if you have a chance. And John, it's been another great week of profundities. And, you know, just when I think that you've outdone yourself, you'll step it up to another level. We appreciate you so much. I mean, over 600 people listening live. It's always a pleasure to have you. And we're going to be looking forward to next Friday as well, John. Anything that you want to leave in the minds of this great group that perhaps if they're having a cold beverage tomorrow or sitting around the water cooler at work and they have a moment for something to come into their mind, what would you like to leave with them for that, a moment such as that?
Well, this is purely personal advice coming from an old veteran of many wars. But I am an American and I love the country. I don't love the government, and I don't trust it. But the land of the free, I come from the land of the free, and my message is freedom ain't free. Freedom is not free, and never, ever take it for granted and delegate your freedom to the authorities. The Gnostics warned about the authorities, and we have reached the moment when that game has to be won on the side of humanity.
Very well stated. Ladies and gentlemen, John Lamb Lash, these are conversations that never happened. We appreciate you being here so much, John. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Same here, Jeffrey. Thanks so much.
We'll be looking forward to seeing you in the beauty that is to come.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Take care, my friend. Of course, that's John's great thing that he says. And it really caught me because, you know, you're used to me saying this world's going to be better than it's ever been sooner than you can even imagine. And I'm a little long-winded, but John just says and we'll see you in the beauty that is to come. And it's the same thought, just in a much more succinct fashion from John Lamb Lash. You know, I've done a lot of work over these almost a decade that we've been on YouTube. Well, not quite a decade. I guess it's been about 7 years. But this work that we're doing here with John, JLL, if you will, is among the best that we've ever done. And I think it's some of the most important. And these are conversations that will be remembered long after JLL and JAD have gone the way of all human animals. And we just are trusting and believing. And I know that these are having a profound effect in helping change people's lives. Folks, we appreciate the hell out of every single one of you. This is our last normal late night in the Heartland show. Starting Monday, we'll be knocking off about 11:30 Central Time, because we have to get ready to go on terrestrial radio at midnight. And we'll be doing that in the state of Utah and the state of Georgia to start. And we'll give you more information on that as we go. So it'll be late night in the Heartland here from 10 to 11:30 as usual. And if you want, you can come back at midnight for another 2 hours. It'll still be called Late Night in the Heartland. And we will be airing it on the radio stations. And also I'll simulcast it here on the platforms that we use. So, John, thanks again for being here. And every one of you, we appreciate you more than you know. And I really mean that. I really mean that. And, you know, it's been another great, great week. And, you know, this is Late Night in the Heartland. But night after night, you folks make my day. And I want to appreciate and express my appreciation for you. And we are the last generation of real humans. We are unindoctrinating ourselves. And we are about to get busy. And we're about to get busy winning. Hashtag winning. That's you and me. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. It's been Late Night in the Heartland. And we'll be back before you know it with more podcast excellence. The world's going to be better than it's ever been, sooner than you can ever imagine.